Welcome back to my GMC Sonoma project that's been taking me almost 20 years, where I like to wear the same hat, the same shirt, and in this episode, I start off with the lower bag mounts, run into a little bit of a roadblock, move over to the lower four-link mounts. That just took a lot longer than I anticipated. I'm learning as I'm going, and I do a lot of learning in this episode. I hope you enjoy. As I mentioned in a previous video, I need to do some shopping. So I've sent out my design for the lower link frame mounts to be water jet cut, as well as I put an order for a custom drive shaft. So hopefully they will come in the next few days. Maybe the drive shaft will be a week. In the meantime, there is some work that I can do, one of which is the lower bag mounts. So again, in that same previous video, I talked about my design and how I came about these tab and slot idea. So next up is get back on the TIG welder and get them welded up. So I square up the first leg of the mount using a small magnet, then I tack it in. I weld up the mount and my welds are decent. There's good color, no porosity, but that won't last in this video. I then set up the second leg, get that welded up. Lastly, I flip the mounts over and weld in the gap I designed into the slot and tab. It was a bit wider than I had envisioned, so I had to weave it back and forth across the gap. The second one came out way better than the first. Now with the lower bag bracket welded up and the upper bracket tacked in, I can test fit it and have a bit of a problem because my axle locator is hitting the bag itself. And it's close, but you can see that the bolt holes aren't centered, so it has to move towards the tire just a little bit. So what that means for me is that I can't weld this in yet until I remove that. I don't want to remove that until I have the bars, the upper and lower, in position, because once they're in position, I could lock in the axle to any part of kind of the cross members that are in the back. Once that's done, I could then cut off the axle locator and then move the bag so it's centered with the bolts here. So just a slight delay because I need all the other pieces to finish the arms, the four-link arms, before I can actually finish up the bag mounts themselves. Oh, and another learning experience, 3/16 can still warp with a lot of heat. So my guess is with this fillet weld, this part has lifted on each one. Now I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to redo these brackets because this part is still flat where the bag sits, and I need all of the force to go down these legs anyways. So with the bag that's going to be bolted in the center, it's going to distribute all the force down these legs and into the axle. Actually, I don't want any of the force to come over here because it'll just bend it more. So the fact that it's bent, it's not a problem. I really could actually just cut off the sides, but it looks prettier if it's just a round circle. Okay, I'm excited. The local water jet place gave me a call and my parts are ready. Here's the puzzle for my lower four-link mounts on the frame side. This is my first time getting something water jet cut, and I should have known there'd be oxidation, rust. So there is a bit of cleanup. I need to remove the mill scale so I can weld the parts together. What I noticed on another part is I was having trouble. I was using roll-lock, 36 grit, 60 grit, even flat disc, even wire wheel. And this mill scale on this part is really tough. And so I did a bit of research, found that phosphoric acid can actually lift up the mill scale, and that's a lot easier because I just need to soak it and then rinse it rather than having to spend probably the same amount of time grinding and trying to remove this mill scale off. So I did an experiment on a few parts and it actually worked out pretty well. So you can see a white bucket right behind me. In there is some metal prep, which I'll show you. And one of the parts is soaking there to get the mill scale removed. So here's the metal prep solution. It's a product from POR15. For those that are in Canada, you can pick this up from your local Canadian Tire. And I have some parts soaking in it. For those that have used this product before, you'll notice it's not purplish pink. I don't know what happened. I had done some parts yesterday, left the solution overnight, and came back in the morning and noticed that it's clear. It is bubbling, so it's doing something, but it's going to be a bit of an experiment to see if it's just as effective. If it's not, then I'll buy another container of metal prep and redo these parts. So I'll leave these parts soaking in here for about 30 minutes. Then I'll take them out, rinse them off with a hose, and that will remove all the mill scale. And if there's any stubborn mill scale, I'll put it back in the solution for another 15 minutes and then rinse it off. Lastly, I dry the parts completely. With the mill scale off, I can now assemble my puzzle. So the first thing I did is I took off one of the lower links and bolted it to the two brackets here and inserted it into the slot. Made sure it was square. Now I am worried about warpage. I saw it with the lower bag mount that too much excessive heat started to bend 3/16 inch plate. So I'm going to tack things for now, and I may need to assemble it in totality with tacks and then finish weld on the frame. I'm still figuring that out, but first step, I'll do some tack welds, start to build up the lower frame mount for the lower links. Metal prep leaves a zinc coating, which is great to reduce rust from forming, but not great when it's vaporized. So I start by sanding it away in the areas that I'm going to weld. I add some tacks. Then I realized that the tabs were not flush with the mount themselves. So out comes a cutoff wheel and a bit of hammering to get them in place. I tried to jig up the mount, but it just wasn't to be. So here's where I'm at. I tried to do a quick assembly of the bracket on my welding table, and I was having problems, so I decided, well, let's try to see if I could get it lined up on the frame itself. So I attached it to the lower link bar, and while I have this part is square, when I measure it this way, it is off, which means that the whole arm here needs to go in that way, which is going to lead into problems because of my design. Now, I don't know if it's a huge deal, so what I'm going to do is tack in the tabs on the other side, line it up over there, see what that looks like, because maybe the axle is just off a little bit and it just needs to shift out that way, and then everything will line up. So before I do any cutting, I'm going to do some testing on the driver's side. So here's a mess up. I welded the tabs on the wrong side. I did two passenger sides. So now I'm trying to cut the tack welds and try to pry it out. Not as easy as I thought it would be. Tack welds hold on pretty good, but I need to flip it around so it'd be on that side. So there's some good news. I've confirmed that the axle is centered, because when I put on the driver's side, I'm equal distance from this bar to this plate as I am on this side, on the passenger side, which is 10 inches. And this isn't quite square, it's off by 1 degree. So 91 degrees is what I'm reading, and I'm reading the exact same on this side. So both ends are pointing inwards, so this way, about 1 degree. Now, I'm telling myself, hey, that gives it a little bit more tracking, more centered, a little bit of triangulation. Maybe I'm just telling that because I don't want to have to redo everything, because what I'd have to do is two options. One is remake this piece so it's slightly inwards, or I cut off the tabs on the back and shift that inwards this way. What I think I'm going to do is leave it as is. It's urethane bushings. There is some give to them, and if for whatever reason they're wildly getting worn out, I have some options. I could either buy another set, I could go to rubber, which would make it looser suspension but more give, or I could go to rod ends, which will be a harsher ride but I'd have lots of adjustment, and with misalignment spacers, a degree is not going to be a problem. So if I aim for perfection, it's going to take me another 20 years to get this done. I want this car on the road under its own power before the end of this year, and not complete, but at least that I could drive it in and out of the garage. All right, everyone, I have been at this for a few hours. I am running into some challenges, but I am motivated to work my way through them. I want to get this done, but I also want to get it right. So I'm balancing things off. It will not be perfect. And that's what I have to keep on telling myself, is that I'm going to have some learning moments. There's going to be some mistakes. Some of the mistakes I will be able to completely overcome. Some I just need to adapt and go forward. One of the things I've noticed is that this isn't level anymore. It's off by 0.2, 0.3 degrees. And I swear it was either 0 or maybe 0.1 at max. And the last time I checked this out was a few months ago. The seasons have changed, and I do have cracks in the floor of my garage. And it actually is heaving in some spots, so it may have heaved a bit and moved everything off. So I'm going to start using measurements based off of kind of the frame itself. I'm going to have to trust that it was square before and it's going to remain square. Again, it's not perfect. Like if I measure from here all the way back there, it's probably maybe 0.2 degrees, but I can adjust things with shim. So again, I got to overcome some of these. It's not going to be dead on 0 across the board. It's my first time taking on a project like this. This is why it's taking me 20 years. Anyway, back to the bracket. So since I want the spacing to be 3 inches, I have some 1x2x3 blocks set at 3 inches here and hidden away in there. And you can see that it is definitely pushed back. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is bring these in a little bit more. I have a little bit of threads left. So I'll bring that in, maybe 1/4 of an inch. See if I could get this a little bit more adjusted. I'll have to do the same on the other side. And then go from there. So instead of it being 28 3/4, it might be, 28.5 inches length. All right, so 2 turns inward, which is almost bottoming it out, did the trick. It's bang on equal on either side. So I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to now test the other side to make sure that everything is square, and doing the same thing will give me the same result. So fingers crossed. And with the quick test on the driver's side, first glance I think it's going to be okay, but I want to use the 1, 2, 3 blocks and totally position it. But the distance here seems similar to the passenger side. Talking about the passenger side, since I'm gonna have to pull out the blocks to test the other side, I just put a couple of tack welds in the corners so that it'll be easier to bring it back together. Okay, and looking this way, it's fairly centered. And the fact that the 1, 2, 3 block center hole is lined up with the center of the bed mounts, it's giving me a lot of confidence that it's in the right position. So now I just got to figure out the right way to weld it without creating too much distortion and getting it back into this position. Similar to the start of the mounts, I removed some of the zinc coating before welding. While doing this, I broke one of the tack welds, so I'll take the time to walk you through my process of setting up the mount on the frame. I'll take this opportunity to prep the frame by removing the mill scale, which was way less stubborn than the mill scale that was on the mount pieces themselves. I first bolt in the mount to get the right distance from the axle, then attach all 3 pieces with the 1, 2, 3 block near the tabs. Then I place a second 1, 2, 3 block near the bed mount, and lastly I tack it in, but this time in a few places. I now move the mount to the welding table. Here, I'm Fusion Tack welding 1/8 plate that I will fully weld up to strengthen the mount some more. Fusion Tack welding is helpful when you need a free hand to hold the piece while you're welding and therefore can't use a filler rod. once I weld up as much as I can on the table, I bring the mount back to the frame and bolt it in once again. I ended up bringing the link out by a half turn just to get everything centered to the bed mount. Now tack it into place. With everything in place, I add a few more tacks to the tabs. I'll fully weld them up when I don't have the urethane bushings close by because they will melt. I add a few permanent welds, and then using a clamp, I squeeze the vertical parts of the mount to the bed mount and tack them together. And then weld up as much as I can. It's now time for me to remove the bolts to have more room to weld the mount to the frame. Now keep an eye on all the different tools that come out. So you would have seen me struggle to get this bolt out. I finally got it out. I don't know what was causing it to be such a struggle yesterday. Using the impact wrench, couldn't get it off. This morning, put on some liquid wrench, tightened it a little bit, put some more, and it finally came free. And the nuts I'm using really should just be for final assembly. It's the lock nuts that are not round on the end. And since I'm taking this on and off so much, I'm just going to buy some of the regular nuts just to make my life a little bit easier and save these for final assembly. And lastly, the bolt itself, I'm gonna have to get a new one. You could try to get it in focus here. So you can see now that it's in focus, those threads are completely knackered. So I'm gonna have to get another one of these bolts and along with some regular nuts for test assembly. A couple more things. So doing some welding, a lot of it went well. You could see nice color. And then I did this outside corner and I didn't think I was putting that much heat, but it's gray and got porosity again. I'm overcooking the part. I know what's going wrong. I don't know exactly how to fix it in this situation. But even over here where this is, really good color, I did the exact same thing on the other side and it's gray with oxidation. So some of it's boggling my mind because exact same settings and I'm having different problems. It comes out good in one case and it comes out bad the other. The other thing is I have quite a bit of a gap here, so I do have some filler rod that will fit there. I think I'm just going to take it slow, put it in there, but I also have to be careful because it's so open, it's going to suck in so much heat, or it's going to retain so much heat that I could run into that oxidation. So that's an area that I'm going to have to watch out for. I remove the braces and start to weld the big gaps. And as you can see from my expression, this isn't going well. I even try to cool it down and re-weld it, but it just isn't working out. So I've been doing some experimentation on the gaps that I have on the bed mount, and you could see here that this is actually kind of the best outcome that I've had so far. But what I did is I laid down some 1/8 filler rod, and you could kind of see it, me starting to do it there. And then I ended up welding it twice. First time on the inside and then on the outside using 332 filler rod to fill it in. Now, not perfect, porosity here, porosity there. And, I was playing around here as well. I was actually using a higher amperage, so my other torch, and going at 175 amps, just so I can burn and move quick. So better, but I'm still getting kind of that gray oxidation. I cleaned it up a little bit, so it's not too bad. It looks okay, but it actually wasn't right away. And still the porosity, right away, I hit it, and even more on this side. I hit it with the torch and all of a sudden it's just like burning up and blowing, like literally like 1 second. So it's like there's a bomb in there. I hit the torch, the amperage, and right away it blows up. So probably the material itself is my guess, because it just went so quick, like right away. Anyway, you know, I'll have to clean it up. You know, that's gonna take some time. I won't do that on camera, but you know, I'm slowly kind of making my way. I think these bigger joints, I'm just gonna use the MIG welder. It's gonna be a lot easier and save some money on argon as well. I bust out the MIG welder and start welding the mounts to the frame on the back side where it's a tight spot. I then fix up all the gaps and porosity on the bed mount. After some grinding and sanding, I think it's looking pretty good. Lastly, I put in a temporary support between the mounts so I can remove the old one I had placed some time ago. So here's another learning moment, or rather a mistake. This bushing is designed for a 9/16 bolt, but I designed this hole for a 5/8 inch bolt. So you could tell that the bushing isn't quite centered because it's designed for smaller, and you want as much surface of the tabs to be on the bushing. Now, if I keep it as is, then there's a little bit of play, a little bit of slop, because this will be able to move within the longer hole. So this being the bolt will have a little bit more play within a bigger hole. The reason why I had designed this for 5/8 inch bolts is because for the upper links, the place that I'm looking at has an option of either 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch bolts holes for the forelinks. So I had started to design the upper one, which I used to mock up this part here. And when I went to go draw it, I forgot to adjust it for a smaller, a 9/16 inch bolt rather than a 5/8. Anyway, long story short is double check your work. The way I think I could correct it is I could buy new bushings that are same here, but designed for a 5/8 inch hole rather than a 9/16. So, you know, that's a $50, because one on each side, a $50 mistake that I made just because I made this hole slightly too big. I'm gonna end things off here, and I did want to finish the forward link mounts, but I also want to edit and post the video before the weekend. So I know it might not seem like a lot of content, but believe me, it took a lot of time and a lot of learning. In the next episode, I'm gonna be playing with this guy. So I do hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.